here I have this illustration of a stormtrooper helmet, and it's pretty flat and bland. It doesn't have a lot of detail. If you take a look at this image over here, comic book artists, what they'll do is they'll vary their line width, and they'll add different line widths to make things more interesting, to give it volume and depth, and that's what we want to do here. So there's a tool in Illustrator called the width tool, and it's right here. Shift W is the keyboard shortcut to get to the width tool. And with the width tool, what I'm going to do is just move my cursor over a path, and when it interacts with a path, you'll see that you'll have this little cursor with a plus arrow next to it. And what that allows you to do is vary the width of the path. So in this particular example, this detail right here, this is supposed to be a shadow. What I'm going to do is just click and drag, and that's going to increase the width of that part of the stroke, but it's going to taper off at the ends, almost like we're drawing with a brush. So I'm going to do the same thing from this side, and then I'll just keep going and do some more. Like maybe this side is the shadow side, and maybe this side is the light side. And I'll do some more here, just to give this a little bit more depth. And you see that I'm only doing this on one part of the stroke, not all of the stroke. Just want to add a little depth, not going too crazy here. So that's the width tool. So you can use the width tool to make adjustments to the path to give it a little bit more life. Okay, next up we're going to take a look at brushes. And the brush tool itself, there's several different types of brushes, and there's a couple different brush tools in the toolbox. So you have in the toolbox, you have a regular paintbrush tool, the Blob Brush tool, and the pencil tool. The pencil tool just creates paths. That's all it's used for. And those paths can be drawn over each other. So for example, if I start drawing with the pencil tool, you'll see that it just creates a path. That's all it does. And if I try to draw near it again, it'll change the path based on how I'm drawing closer to it. And all those options are in the pencil tool options. If I double click on the pencil tool, you have this slider up here on the top, but notice that it's keep selected is on and edit selected paths. And then as long as I'm in the range of 15 pixels, I can adjust the path after it's been drawn. So that's the pencil tool. Typically I don't use the pencil tool because it's just creating paths, and I can do the same thing with the pen tool. The next tool we can take a look at is under the pencil tool. We have the Blob Brush tool, and with the Blob Brush tool you can have access to any brushes that you want to use. So here I have this thick brush here. What I'm going to do is zoom in on this, and this is some placed artwork that I have of Master Yoda. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to draw this, and the Blob Brush tool works in conjunction with the eraser tool. So, and I'm also using a Wacom tablet. I have a Wacom Intuos tablet, and when I draw with the Blob Brush tool, I can draw, and it will detect my pressure. You can see that the lines are not coming out uniform, and if I add more pressure, the line stroke will get heavier. So maybe I'll go down to this brush to start off here. I'm just going to try to, yeah, that's not going to work. So maybe I'll just grab this brush, start really small. I'm just going to try to trace the outline of this. And what the Blob Brush tool does is it creates a continuous filled object. It's not a path. Right, so if I just stop right here for a second, I'll just show you. If I select this, you'll see that it's not a path, that it's an outlined object. And what the Blob Brush continues to do is that if you continue to draw near it, it's going to add to that object, that selected object. Later on, I'll just fill this all in with a larger brush. For right now, I'm just working on the outline here. And I'm just doing a quick job. I'm going to make mistakes, and that's okay because I can use the eraser tool to go back and make adjustments afterwards. Okay, so I'll grab a larger brush, go ahead and fill in the details here. You can also make your brush larger if you hold down the right bracket key. And if you want to make it smaller, you hold down the left bracket key. And those keyboard shortcuts are also the same in Photoshop. And again, just to show you, the Blob Brush connects everything. Everything that you're painting, it connects it all. So even if I have this selected, doesn't matter if it's selected or not, it's just going to add to the blob. That's why they call it the Blob Brush. So obviously, I just did that really quick, just trying to get the outline in right, and now it's time to clean it up. So there's a couple different ways that you can work with this. You can try to be accurate, as I'm trying to do here, but you're not gonna get really defined. So what you can do is go back to this tool, the eraser tool, which works in conjunction with this tool. And again, it's brush based, so depending on the brush size that you have, now I can go in and I can make adjustments and just try to clean up the art. And that just takes away from those edges. Okay, I don't want to go and do the whole thing, but you can get the gist of what this does. The Blob Brush tool and the eraser tool work together. All right. Moving down, so that's Blob Brush and Eraser. And now we're going to take a look at art brushes. So you'll notice here in the brushes panel itself, there is a series of brushes. We have these standard brushes, we have some basic brushes, we have these specific brushes. The Bristle Brushes are new, and then we have some pattern brushes. And in the brushes itself, there are several brushes that we can make or use. So there's Calligraphic Brushes, Scatter Brushes, Art Brushes, Bristle Brush, Pattern Brush, and I want to show you all of those today. So the first type, that Calligraphic Brush, if we go ahead and try to make one of those, what's going to do is give us this Calligraphic Brush option. I have this interactive display that will show me what that brush is going to look like. So the angle, I'll set the angle, let's say to 45 degrees. And then for the roundness, I'll pull this in. And you can see that this is being updated. And then for the size, right now it's a 9 point. I'll just make that a little bit bigger. And now these three properties can either be fixed or they can be set to pressure, which would be the Wacom tablet pressure or the stylus wheel, or tilt or bearing. That's the tilt of the stylus, or the bearing of the stylus, or the rotation of the stylus. Now every Wacom tablet has its own settings. So what I'm going to do here is just going to send it to random, and with the variation slider you can set that, and you can see that the angle can have some variation in it. Same thing with the roundness. Might want to make that roundness a little variable. And then the size right now, we can make that a little bit larger. So you see that we have some different variations here that we built into the brush. And with these brushes, you need to use the paintbrush tool, and then using that particular brush that I just created. So here's the brush that I created, and with that brush, it's going to give me this kind of style, this calligraphic style. So with calligraphic brushes, I mean, obviously the name implies what you're going to do with them, and that is, making some calligraphy. So, you might want to do something like this. Okay, so that was one type. The next type is scatter brush. So let's take a look down here. We have some options for scatter brush. We have this Boba Fett helmet, and we have the star. So we'll start off really simple and to create brushes, you can grab artwork, either placed artwork or artwork that you've made in Illustrator, and you can drag it directly into the brushes panel. So that's what I'll do here. So I'll drag this art into the brushes panel, and scatter brush gets selected. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Then I have a bunch of options. I'll just call this star brush. And so we have size, spacing, scatter, and rotation. And right now those are fixed. So that's not really what we want. So I'm going to set all of these to random. And this, you can think of this side as the minimum and this side is the maximum. So you just pull those apart. That's a little too extreme. You maybe want to stay something like this. So the spacing is the amount of spacing between each item, and then scattering is the actual, how much you want to scatter across the page, and then the rotation, how much we want to rotate each one. And then the rotation could be relative to the page or to the path that you create. And for colorization, you're going to see this option for all the brushes. So let's just take a look at this. So we have tints and shades, and hue shift. Hue shift will use the color that's in the artwork itself. So that's not really going to do too much for us. Tints and shades will apply whatever tint is applied to the stroke color. Because remember that brushes are based on strokes, except for the blob brush that we just looked at. And then we also have tint, so we'll try to tint the artwork as well. So for here, I'm going to just choose none. And then you can see this little light bulb will tell you exactly what those things do, so you can get a sense of what's going to happen here. So I'll click OK on that, and I'll zoom out, and then we'll take a look at using this brush. So I'll grab the brush tool, and I have my new scatter brush. And I'll just draw a brush stroke, and you can see what happens. So those stars get scattered across the page, which is pretty cool. You can do different things. So it's not really like patterns, but it's like a pattern. And we'll do the same thing. So I have some artwork here, and I can drag this again into, and I want a scatter brush. I'll click OK. And I'll call this Boba. And I clicked OK too fast, but let's see what happens when we draw it. Without setting any options, you can see what happens. It's pretty much just strings it along. So there's no change in this spacing, there's no change in the scatter. So we want to modify those things. So one thing that's useful to do is select your artwork, go into the brush, make sure that the preview checkbox is on, and then you can start playing around with the options to see what that looks like. Right, so that's a little too big. Right, the spacing. Spread it out a little bit more. Scattering, push them apart. And rotation will make them spin. Okay. And for the colorization, let's set it to tints and apply to brush strokes is what we want. So see what happened? It took on the color of the stroke. So if I go into my swatches panel and I choose a different color, it's going to tint it based on whatever the stroke color is. Okay, so that's scatter brushes. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at the next one, which is art brushes. So art brushes, I have some artwork here. Let's zoom in a little bit so you can see. I have this BB-8 artwork, and I also have this vine artwork. So let's start with the vine. So I'm going to select all the vine artwork, and this is just some petals and a line that goes through it. So I'm going to drag that into the brushes panel, and I want this to be an art brush, and I'll go ahead and click OK. So with the art brush options, first thing we want to set is the direction. So right now, by default, it sets it to down, and I don't want it to go that way. I want it to go natural with the direction of the actual vine. So I'll set this to stroke up like this. For the colorization method, this is colored the way that we want, so I'm not going to change anything like that. We have scale proportionately, which will scale it on the actual brush stroke. Scale stretch to fit stroke length will stretch it out. So if the stroke is longer than the artwork will get stretched out, and then stretch between guides, and you'll see these guides here. So with stretch between guides, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this top guide down so that this part of the artwork won't get affected. This part of the artwork will get affected. It'll stretch out based on what we do here. And I'll just call this vine. Okay, so now with the brush selected, and I have this new vine brush, if I just go ahead and draw a stroke, you'll see what's happening here. Everything gets stretched out except for this last leaf because of the guides that we drew. So again, going back, if I select this, I double click on this. If we change the options here to stretch and turn the preview on, you'll see what that's doing. And then scale proportionally will keep all of the scale intact as much as it can. So those are the different options that we have here for the art brush. Okay. What happens if we have artwork like this? So I'm going to select this art, and I'm going to drag this into the brushes panel. And again, we'll set that as an art brush. Let's say that we keep the options as they are, and I just grab my brush tool and I start drawing. So this is what will end up happening. So you see that the direction is wrong. We have a few things that are wrong, and we can't tint it. So again, I'll select the artwork, double click on it. So we do want to tint, and let's say the direction should be up, right? So the head should be on top. And it's going to be hard to separate with the guides here. So we can scale proportionally, stretch to fit, or stretch within the guides. And let's say that with the guides, we'll just maybe preserve the top part of the head here. And I'll click OK and apply to strokes. And you see again here that it's taking on the stroke colors. So let's try that again. So if I just stroke up like this, right, so now I'm painting with BB-8. Okay. One other thing that you can do is create your own artwork, scan it in, and then you can modify it and then bring it into Illustrator and turn that into a brush. So I'll show you what I mean. So I created some brush strokes with a charcoal pencil on some paper. And these are the strokes themselves. I'll show you the original. So here's the original that I cleaned up just a little bit. But now I want to get it to a point where it's just black and white. So to get it to black and white, what I did was I went to image to mode to grayscale. And I discarded all the color information. I just want to make sure this is completely black and white. And then in order to get rid of you can see that the texture of the paper is here. So I want to get rid of the texture of the paper. What I did there is I created a new channel. And in this channel, what we want to do is we want to get it to complete black and complete white. So to do that, I grabbed my brush tool and I set the mode to overlay with the opacity to 100%. So now when I paint over anything that is white, you'll see that it's getting more white, and that's what we want to do here. We want to just get rid of all of this gray part of the paper pattern. Just eliminate that altogether. Just want to get to the brush strokes themselves. That's pretty good. So in Photoshop, anything that's white, complete white, will be selected. Anything that's complete black will not be selected. So here I'm going to inverse the image by hitting Command-I, and I see that I got a couple of areas that I need to clean up here. So I'm just making this black, making sure that it's fully black. And now that I'm done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load this as a selection. I'm going to hold down the Command key, click on the thumbnail. That loads it as a selection. I'm going to turn this on, go back to layers, and then I can hit this button here. And then now I have just my strokes. So I previously had done this. So let's go back into Illustrator, and now I'll place that artwork. Okay, so here's one of them. I'm going to just import that one, and I'm going to click once to place. So here's the artwork. Now, Illustrator allows you to use artwork or images as brushes. So right now, this is an image, and if I want, I can use this as a brush, and later on I'll show you with the image trace what we can do with this to use it as vector. So if I drag this into the brushes panel, and I'm going to choose an art brush, I'll click OK, and I'll just call this charcoal. And again, so setting the direction, the charcoal direction starts here, so we want to just make sure the direction is correct. The tinting method's not going to matter because this is imported art. And then stretching, we'll just keep this stretch to fit stroke length on. And I'll go ahead and click OK on that. All right, so let's try that out. So grab the brush tool, and then click and drag. And now I'm drawing with the artwork that I made. Okay, so you can create your own brushes from artwork that you generated. Let me place another piece that I made. And for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this to vectors. So with the image trace, I have all these different options. And so this is black and white artwork. So I'm just going to choose black and white logo. And you see that the trace didn't really do what I wanted it to do, so I'm going to undo that. I'm going to just try to auto do it, and it's really not doing exactly what I want to do. So there is under Window to Image Trace where it brings up a panel that allows you to fine-tune those options. So for example, if I choose shades of gray, see that it introduces a little bit more grays values here, and then you can choose either more or you can choose less. And then there are some advanced options for the number of paths and the corners. There's a noise option. Right, so there's other options to play with to get the path to look more like what you want. So once I'm done that, the last thing I need to do to make it truly vector, because right now it's still artwork. It's still like a placed image with a preview of what the image trace is going to do. Right up here on the control panel, I'm going to click the expand button, and that's going to finalize it, and it's going to make it into actual vector artwork. So with the vector artwork selected, now I can put this into the brushes panel. And again, this is going to be an art brush. I'll just call this charcoal 2. And make sure the direction is right. And because this is artwork, I can choose tints and click OK. And now with the paintbrush tool, I'll just draw, and it's going to take the color that I have inside of the stroke, so I can make that whatever color that I want. if it's selected. There you go. Okay. So those are art brushes. We talked about scatter brushes, and the last type of brush that we're going to talk about is pattern brushes. So pattern brushes work in a couple different ways, and then we'll have to talk about bristle brushes after. But pattern brushes work in a couple different ways. So with pattern brushes, first of all, you need a pattern, and then in the pattern there are 5 options. There's a start option, there's an end option, there's a side option, and then there are 2 corner options, one in the outside corner and one in the inside corner. So you see here that I have this artwork, and I put here automatic corners because Illustrator introduced a new feature where it's going to automatically choose the corners for you. So I'm going to select this art, and I'm going to drag it into the brush panel, and I'm going to choose pattern brush and click OK. Alright, so you can see automatically what's happening here. So it's putting this artwork on the sides all the way through here, and then for the corners, this is the first corner. I have different options for the types of corners that I want. So I'm going to choose this auto overlap. This is the side panel, right? So that's the original that I want. This is the inside corner. You can see that right now it's empty. There's nothing here. And I'm going to set that to the same auto overlap. And then this would be the start, and this would be the end. So right now I don't have any artwork for that, so I just basically have this pattern. The scale is fixed right now. The spacing is set to 0%. And then for you stretching the fit, you can choose these different options to get it to fit differently. And I'm just going to keep it on stretch to fit. And then again, with colors, I'm going to choose tints and click OK. So with that new pattern brush, if I select this art, it's just basically a rectangle, and I click on this, it's going to apply that to that artwork. And you can see how intricate and detailed this would be. Really difficult to do all at once, drawing individually and duplicating and all that stuff, but putting it into a brush allows you to build out something like this really quick. Now, manually creating your own corners, I'm going to create a new brush with this artwork. So here, this would be the corner art, and this would be the side art. And before you can make the brush, you have to add these to your swatches. So I'm going to go to my swatches panel, and I'm going to select the art that I want for the corner, and I'll drag this into the swatches panel. And then I'll select this art that I want for the side, and I'll drag that into the swatches panel as well. So now going back to the brushes panel, if I create a new brush, I'm going to create a pattern brush and click OK. You see what it's already doing here. So it's already recognizing the side, which is pretty much, even the corners here are working for me. I just have to set the inside corner. So I'll just choose from the options here. And then I have my entire pattern brush. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK on that. And then if I zoom out and select this art again, now I can select the new pattern brush. And the pattern brush is applied. And notice that with the tint option on, it's tinting that. And this creates a nice frame. So you could do this with a box and making different size boxes and scaling and all that stuff, but it's a lot easier to do as a pattern brush. Okay, one last thing before we finish up, and that is bristle brushes. So bristle brushes have been added to Photoshop for a while, and they got introduced into Illustrator recently. So this brush right here is a bristle brush, and the whole idea about bristle brushes, and there's a bristle brush library, is that they accurately reflect, or they try to mimic as much as possible the feel of a real brush. And they don't paint at 100% opacity right off the bat. You can see how faint some of these brush strokes are. And so if I select this fan brush, what I can do with that brush, again, you can see an interactive preview of what's happening with my stylus. As I tilt my pen, you'll see that the preview tilts with it. And then if I start dragging to create a stroke, you'll see what that stroke looks like. And then I can build on this with additional strokes. And it's fully taking the pressure sensitivity from my tablet and it's applying that sensitivity to it. And again, it's simple strokes. It's just strokes. So if I select these strokes and I choose a different brush, you'll see what happens, and I can apply different bristle brushes. You can see what's happening in the background here. Every brush that I select from the brush library is being added to my own brushes for this particular document. So that's the brushes. We took a look at all the different types of brushes. Have fun with those. We took a look at the Blob Brush. We also took a look at the Width tool. So if you have any questions or comments, please put them into discussions.